Chapter 1. The Promise. Leo's knuckles were split and bleeding before he realized he'd been gripping the wrench too hard. He set it down carefully on the workbench, a controlled motion, deliberate, and watched a drop of blood fall onto the concrete floor of his shop. Real blood, real pain, real consequence. Outside, through the open bay door, a woman walked past without looking where she was going. She didn't need to. Her eyes flickered with soft pulses of violet light, her path calculated 6 seconds ahead by computers he would never trust. She laughed at something only she could hear. Her hand rose to cover her mouth in delight, fingers passing through a hologram he couldn't see. She was having a conversation with someone who wasn't there, living half in the physical world and half in somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't follow. Leo wrapped his hand in a shop rag and went back to work. The hydro engine on his bench was older than he was, a beautiful relic from 2030, back when machines were still designed to be repaired instead of replaced. The fuel pump had seized, and he'd spent the last 3 hours coaxing it back to life, with nothing but patience, penetrating oil, and an understanding of how things actually worked. No diagnostic overlay, no AI assistant whispering solutions into his consciousness, just his hands, his knowledge, and the honest resistance of metal against metal. He was torquing down the final bolts when he heard it, the bell above his shop door. Not a soft chime or a pleasant notification tone, a real brass bell on a spring, jangling and harsh, an alarm in a world of whispers. Leo didn't need to look up to know who it was. Only one person still opened doors by hand. "You're bleeding," Maya said from the doorway. "I'm working," Leo replied, not looking up from the engine. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Her footsteps crossed the oil-stained concrete, sleek shoes that cost more than his monthly rent, picking their way carefully between the parts and tools scattered across his floor. "Leo, your hand." He finally looked up at his sister. Maya stood backlit by the street beyond, and for a moment she looked like a visitor from another world, which, in a sense, she was. Her suit was perfectly tailored, adaptive fabric that shifted color subtly in response to lighting. Her eyes held that telltale shimmer, emerald green today, which meant she was logged into her work network. Even standing still, she radiated the kind of effortless efficiency that came from having instant access to all human knowledge. She was 32, he was 27. The gap between them had never felt wider. "It's just a scratch," he said, holding up the rag-wrapped hand. Maya's eyes flickered, a rapid sequence of colors, which meant she was accessing something. "You should disinfect it. There's a 34% chance of infection from workshop injuries higher if—" "Maya!" She stopped, blinked. The shimmer in her eyes faded slightly as she pulled her attention back to the physical world. "Sorry. Habit." She smiled, but it was strained. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd check on you." "You're never in the neighborhood. Your route optimization doesn't bring you within 6 blocks of here unless you program it to." The smile became genuine. "Okay, I came to see you. Is that so hard to believe?" Leo set down the wrench and gave her his full attention. "Oh, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Can't I visit my brother?" "You can. You don't." He softened his tone. "Not in the middle of a workday, not without sending a message first. So, what's wrong?" Maya's eyes flickered again, that nervous tell she developed since getting synced. She was consulting something or someone, or maybe just buying time to think. When she refocused on him, her expression had shifted into something more serious. "There's going to be an announcement. Next week. Vital Links is rolling out NeuralSync 2.0, full sensory integration. Not just visual and auditory, touch, taste, smell, everything. You'll be able to share experiences completely, not just see what someone sees, but feel what they feel. Leo picked up a clean rag and wiped his hands slowly, giving himself time to process. And you're telling me this because the adoption rate is going to be nearly universal, Leo. Everyone who has 1.0 will upgrade. Everyone who's been holding out will get it. The network effects become too powerful to resist. She took a step closer. I'm telling you because I don't want you to be alone. I'm not alone. You have 3 friends who are unsynced. 3, Leo, out of everyone you know. And 2 of them are over 70. I have you. Something painful crossed her face. You have the version of me that remembers to translate herself back into words you can hear. But Leo, I'm having 6 other conversations right now. I'm monitoring my work projects, getting updates from Mom, coordinating dinner plans with David, and consulting a repair manual because I'm genuinely curious about that engine and I want to understand what you're doing. She gestured vaguely at the air around her head. This is normal now. This is how people live. And you're still here reading paper manuals and bleeding on your tools. Someone has to remember how things actually work. The sync knows how things work. It knows better than you do. The sync knows what it's been told. I know what I've touched. They'd had this argument before, in various forms, over the past 3 years. It always ended the same way, with Maya looking at him like he was a beloved artifact she couldn't quite bear to throw away, and Leo feeling like a ghost haunting his own life. But this time, Maya did something unexpected. Her eyes stopped flickering. She closed them for a moment, and when they opened again, they were clear, fully present. She'd logged out. Can I show you something? I need you to understand. Really understand. The memory came to Leo uninvited, sharp and unwelcome. It had been 3 years ago. Maya had burst into a shop with a light on her face he hadn't seen since they were kids. Pure, unfiltered joy. Leo, stop what you're doing right now. You have to see this. He'd been rebuilding a carburetor, focused, halfway through a delicate adjustment, but something in her voice made him set down his tools. She grabbed a manual from his shelf without asking, the thick one for 2303 model hydro engines, written in technical Japanese, a language neither of them spoke. She opened it to a random page and just looked at it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she started reading aloud, and the words coming out of her mouth were Japanese. Perfect, fluent Japanese. Not the halting sounds of someone sounding out phonetics, but the natural rhythm of native speech. Leo had stared, frozen. It's not translating, Maya said, switching back to English. It's not like reading subtitles. The meaning just appears. I understand it the same way I understand English, like it was always there in my head. She laughed, delighted, amazed. It's beautiful, Leo, the way it's written, the technical poetry of it. I can see why you love this stuff. Before he could respond, she looked at the carburetor in front of him. Her eyes flickered, focusing on something he couldn't see. That gasket, she said. 3rd ring. It's degrading. See the discoloration? Leo looked, saw nothing unusual. The sync pulled the failure analysis from the manufacturer's server. That composite material has a 7-year lifespan. This engine is... Her eyes flickered. 9 years old. The gasket is past its safe operating window. It'll fail within 300 hours of operation. She looked up at him, her face full of wonder. It just told me. I didn't have to search for it or look it up. I just wondered, and the information was there, like remembering something I'd always known. Leo had picked up the carburetor, examining the gasket she'd identified through borrowed knowledge fed to her by distant computers. Knowledge she'd never earned, never suffered for, never truly owned. I want to know what I know, not what something else knows through me. The hope in her expression had dimmed, not extinguished, but altered, sad. Oh, Leo, you're going to be so lonely. Maya was reaching into her bag, pulling out something small. A case, metallic and sleek. This is a 2.0 implant, she said, holding it up. Pre-release. I can authorize you for the beta program. You'd be one of the first. Leo looked at the case without touching it. Inside, he knew, was a device smaller than a grain of rice, something that would burrow into his skull and rewrite how he experienced reality. Maya, just listen, please. She set the case on his workbench, next to the engine he'd been repairing. Last month, there was a fire in the Riverside district. Old building, faulty wiring. A family was trapped on the 4th floor, a mother and 2 kids. Leo waited. The first responders were all synced. They arrived and immediately knew the building's layout, the location of the family, the structural weak points, the smoke density. They coordinated without speaking, moving like one organism. 37 seconds from arrival to extraction. 37 seconds, Leo. Maya's eyes were bright now, but not from the sink, from tears. She wiped her eyes. Those kids are alive because their rescuers were synced. That's not surrender. That's not losing your humanity. That's using tools to be better than we could ever be alone. It was a good argument, a powerful one. Leo felt the weight of it. You're right, he said quietly. Maya's face lit up with surprise and hope. That family is alive because of the sync. I'm not arguing that. But Maya, what happens when the sync fails? It doesn't fail. The redundancy systems. Everything fails eventually. Everything. I picked up the carburetor, held it up. This was built by the best engineers of its time with multiple redundancy systems. And look, it failed. I'm fixing it because it failed. That's not the same thing, isn't it? Leo set the carburetor down carefully. Those rescuers moved like one organism because they were one organism, one system. What happens when that system has a glitch? When the building layout is wrong, or the structural analysis is off, or the network drops for just 10 seconds? There are safeguards. There are always safeguards, until there aren't. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. You've outsourced your thinking to something you don't understand and can't control. And you've done it so completely that you can't imagine functioning without it. That's not a tool, Maya. That's a dependency. And dependencies are vulnerabilities. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Maya picked up the case from his workbench. You're wrong, she said, but her voice was soft. You're going to watch the world become something beautiful, and you're going to stay here in your shop, covered in grease, fixing broken things that should have been recycled years ago. Maybe, Leo said, but when the beautiful thing breaks, someone's going to need to know how to fix it without asking a computer. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she logged back in. He could see it happen, the shimmer returning to her eyes, her attention fracturing across multiple streams. I love you. Even if you're being an idiot. Love you too. Even if you're being reckless. She left without another word. the brass bell jangling behind her. Chapter 2. The Fracture. Part 1. Before. The evening rush was Leo's favorite time to mock the new world, though he kept the mockery to himself, a private rebellion behind the grease-stained counters of his shop. Through the bay door, he watched them flow past, the synced. Their movements had a quality that unsettled him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't just the efficiency, though that was eerie enough. It was the absence. No one bumped into each other. No one apologized. No one looked where they were going because they didn't need to. Their paths were calculated 6 seconds ahead, adjusted in real time by the invisible hand of VitaLink's traffic algorithms. A mother pushed a stroller, her eyes flickering with the telltale pulse of incoming messages. She never looks down at her child. She didn't need to. The stroller's sensors fed directly to her visual cortex, showing her the baby's heart rate, oxygen levels, comfort index. Perfect information. Perfect parenting. Yet Leo noticed she never smiled at the child, never made those nonsense cooing sounds his own mother used to make. What was the point? The baby's contentment score was 94%. The data said everything was fine. A couple walked hand in hand, their fingers interlaced, but their eyes, those flickering, distant eyes, were somewhere else entirely, having a conversation perhaps, or watching different streams. Together but fundamentally alone, their consciousness divided between the meat of their palms touching and the infinite elsewheres of the sink. Leo turned back to his workbench, to the old radio he was repairing. His hands were dark with grease, his fingernails permanently lined with the evidence of his trade. He ran his thumb over the radio's worn case, feeling the tiny scratches and dents, a history written in impacts and use. This radio had been dropped, carried, loved. It had a story that existed in the physical world. He was replacing a fuse when the world ended. The fracture. The signal didn't announce itself. It simply failed. Through the bay door, Leo saw the change before he understood it. The flowing river of synchronized humanity simply stopped. Not gradually, not with confusion. They stopped as if someone had paused a video. Every body locked mid-stride, mid-gesture, mid-breath. For one crystalline second, there was perfect silence. Then the screaming started. It wasn't a scream, it was the scream. Thousands of voices unified in a sound Leo would never be able to forget, a sound that would wake him sweating for the rest of his life. It was the sound of pain beyond description, transmitted directly into the nervous system, bypassing all the body's natural defenses. Every synced person on the street was experiencing the same agony at the same instant, and their screams created a harmony that made the air itself seem to vibrate with suffering. Leo's hands froze on the fuse, his breath caught. The synchronized traffic pattern collapsed. Vehicles that had been moving in perfect formation, inches apart, traveling at speeds that would have been suicidal without computer coordination, lost their invisible tether. The crashes started small and cascaded outward like dominoes, falling in slow motion, each impact triggering 3 more. But it was the people that made Leo's blood turn to ice. They began hurting themselves. A man in a business suit clawed at his own face, his fingers digging bloody gashes through his cheeks, his eyes rolling back until only the whites showed. He stumbled backwards directly into the path of an airborne spinning tire that had sheared off an axle. The rubber caught him under the chin. There was a wet, popping sound, and his head snapped back at an impossible angle. His body collapsed. A woman clawed at her temples, her fingers hooking deep into her own eye sockets. With a final, desperate scream, she ripped her own eyes out, the optic nerves snapping like rubber bands before she collapsed, the bloody eyeballs still clutched in her fists. Leo's stomach lurched. He took a step back into his shop. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. High above, a construction drone simply let go. Leo watched the payload, a massive pallet of construction materials, hang in the air for one impossible moment before all hell broke loose. It fell like a god's hammer. When it hit, the sound was like thunder enclosed in a metal box. The impact sent a shock wave through the pavement that Leo felt through his boots. He couldn't see exactly what happened to the vehicle below. The payload had landed between buildings, partially obscured. But he saw the spray pattern on the nearby walls. He saw the debris cloud, not just dust and metal, but other things, body parts. He saw pieces of the pallet ricochet through the crowd like artillery. The sounds were worse than the sights. The wet impacts. The sounds bodies made when they stopped being bodies. The silence after someone stopped screaming. Leo's hand found the bay door control. He slammed it down. The metal door descended with agonizing slowness, the chaos outside compressing into a narrowing band of horror show imagery. Blood on the glowing sidewalk. So much blood, it was pooling, running in rivulets between the LED tiles, making them flicker and short out. Bodies that had been people, hands reaching, faces frozen in expressions that no human face should ever make. The door sealed with a final clang, and Leo was alone, in the muffled quiet of his shop. But the sounds continued. Muted now, but there. The screaming, the crashes, the wet sounds. He stood there, one hand still on the door control, the other clutching the workbench to keep himself upright. His heart hammered against his ribs like something trying to escape. The radio on his bench continued its steady analog hum, the only sound in his shop that made sense. 8 seconds. The glitch lasted 8 seconds. Leo knew this because afterward, the official reports would say it over and over. An 8-second anomaly in the Vitalink neural interface protocol. 8 seconds. As if the duration somehow made it less catastrophic. As if you could measure this kind of horror in seconds. When it passed, and Leo only knew it passed because the quality of the screaming changed, became individual again instead of that unified howl, he waited a full minute before he even considered opening the bay door. When he finally did, raising it just high enough to see, the city had transformed. The glowing sidewalks, those marvels of engineering that had never shown a crack, never needed repair, were painted in ways the designers had never imagined. The LED tiles flickered erratically where fluids had seeped into their circuits. Emergency lights strobed red and blue, casting everything in hellish alternating colors. The synced were rising, slowly, like people waking from a nightmare only to discover the nightmare was real. Their eyes still flickered with data, but the flickering was erratic now, stuttering. Error messages, Leo realized? They were seeing error messages. A woman stood near his shop, swaying. Her hands were shaking so violently she couldn't control them. The flickering in her eyes was constant, rapid fire. She was trying to access something, help, information, anything. But the sync that had been her constant companion was choking on its own failure. She looked at Leo, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. Her eyes focused on his unsynced, unflickering gaze. And what she saw in her expression was something he never thought he'd see from one of them. Envy. Raw, desperate envy for the simple fact that his mind was still entirely his own. "What?" she started. her voice barely above a whisper. "What happened to us?" Leo didn't have an answer. Around them, the city that had been so proud of its efficiency, its synchronization, its perfect technological harmony, smoldered and bled. Emergency responders were arriving, the ones in manual vehicles, Leo noted darkly. The self-driving ambulances were still sorting out their formation protocols. The woman stumbled away, joining the slowly moving tide of survivors who walked like ghosts through a city that had betrayed them. The aftermath. Leo didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the screaming. By morning, his shop had become an island. He opened the bay door to find the street transformed. The gleaming tiles had been scrubbed, probably by cleaning drones working through the night, but everyone could still see where they'd been stained. The sidewalk had a map now, a topology of trauma rendered in faint discoloration that no amount of cleaning could fully erase. But it was the people that had changed most. They came in waves, the unsynced, the ones who had refused the implants, who had been mocked and marginalized and called Luddites. They came carrying signs, their anger finally justified, their paranoia validated in the most horrific way possible. Leo watched them flow past his shop. The crowd had an energy he recognized from old videos, from history books about social upheavals and revolutions. This wasn't a protest. This was a primal scream given form, a collective trauma demanding acknowledgement. "My mind is not your OS," a young woman shouted, her voice already hoarse. She couldn't have been more than 25. Leo wondered how many friends she'd lost yesterday. 8 seconds of hell, what's next? The sign was crude, painted on cardboard, but the message cut through the morning air like a blade. Marcus Chen appeared in the crowd, one of Leo's regular customers who had always made a show of sighing loudly when Leo's ancient card reader took 10 seconds to process a payment. Now, Marcus screamed himself hoarse, his face red with rage and vindication. All those inconvenient seconds Leo had cost him suddenly seemed like a small price to pay for the security of keeping his mind to himself. But interspersed among the angry unsynced were the others, the synced, the survivors. They moved differently now. Where before they had flowed with liquid grace, now they flinched and hesitated. Every loud noise made them freeze. Hands were flexibly moving to their temples as if trying to protect what had already been violated. Their eyes still flickered with data streams, but the flickering was nervous, uncertain. They kept touching their faces, their heads, as if trying to confirm they were still real, still solid, still themselves. A man Leo recognized, a Vital Link engineer who used to lecture him about the digital divide, walked past in the crowd. His eyes were hollow. The flickering in his irises was reduced to an occasional, stuttering pulse. He moved like someone who had survived a car crash, that peculiar combination of grateful to be alive and terrified it might happen again. The unsynced protesters looked at the synced with a new expression, not pity, something harder, suspicion, fear. The synced were walking proof of the vulnerability, living evidence that the promise of perfect connection came with a price tag written in neurons and screams. A mother pulled her child closer when a synced man stumbled too near. The man noticed, and something in his expression broke. He understood what he had become, not a victim to be pitied, but a contamination to be avoided. Part 5. Leo's Realization. Leo stood in his doorway, watching the two rivers of humanity flow past, the angry unsynced and the traumatized synced, and felt something shift in his understanding of the world. For years he'd been the holdout, the stubborn old man. He was only 27, but they made him feel ancient, who refused to upgrade, refused to sync, refused to join the beautiful new world. He told himself it was about independence, about keeping his mind his own, about preserving something authentic in an increasingly artificial world. But watching this, he realized he'd been preparing for the wrong disaster. He'd imagined the danger of the sync would be slow and insidious, a gradual erosion of privacy, a creeping loss of autonomy, the soft tyranny of convenience. He'd imagined having time to say, "I told you so." He'd never imagined this. The sudden, catastrophic proof that every synced mind was just one glitch away from becoming a weapon turned against itself. A young woman broke from the protest crowd and stumbled toward his shop. She was synced, her eyes flickered erratically, but she moved with purpose. When she reached his doorway, she stopped, breathing hard. "You fix things?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Old things," Leo replied carefully. "Analog things." "Can you—" She touched her temple, where the vital link port was embedded just behind her hairline. Her fingers trembled. "Can you take it out?" Leo's chest tightened. "I'm not a doctor." "I don't want a doctor," her voice cracked. "Doctors put it in. I want someone who understands machines. I want someone who can make it stop." Behind her, the protest surged and roared. Someone had set up speakers, and a voice boomed across the street. "They turned our children into remote controls." The woman flinched at the sound, her hand pressing harder against her temple. In her eyes, behind the flickering data stream, Leo saw something that made his throat tight. She was terrified of her own mind. "I can't," Leo said quietly. "I'm sorry. That's neurosurgery. That's not something you do in a repair shop." Her expression crumbled. For a moment, Leo thought she might cry. Instead, she just nodded once and turned back toward the crowd, one more ghost walking through the aftermath. Leo watched her go, then looked down at his hands. The same hands that had fixed 1,000 small machines, that had traced circuits and replaced fuses and breathed life back into forgotten technology. Useless hands in the face of this new world's new disasters. He stepped back into his shop and closed the door, but this time the barrier didn't comfort him. On his workbench, the old radio continued its steady hum, proof that some things could be built to last, built to fail gracefully, built to be fixed. Outside, the city that had promised to last forever had revealed itself to be one glitch away from apocalypse. And everyone, synced and unsynced alike, had learned a truth they could never unlearn: that the mind is not a fortress. It's just a room, and someone else had proven they owned the key. The first dominoes. In the Vital Link headquarters, 47 stories above the blood-stained sidewalks, emergency meetings stretched into the early morning hours. Lawyers and engineers and PR specialists spoke in urgent, hushed tones about containment and messaging and liability shields. None of them said what they were all thinking, that this was just the beginning. Because the glitch hadn't been an accident, it had been a preview. Somewhere in the vast, interconnected web of Vitalink's neural network, a door had opened, just for 8 seconds, just wide enough for something to look through and see the millions of minds on the other side, waiting, accessible, vulnerable. The door had closed, but now everyone knew it could be opened again. And 8 seconds had been enough to teach the world what horrors lived on the other side of that door. horrors written in blood and neurons and the screams of people whose minds had for one terrible moment belonged to someone else. The beautiful, efficient city would never be beautiful again. The synced would never feel safe again. And the unsynced would never stop asking the question that now hung over everything, like a sword. What happens when it glitches again? Chapter 3. The Tightening Noose. Part 1. The machine starts moving. 3 days after the glitch, Leo received his first visitor who wasn't a customer. The woman wore a tailored suit with the kind of sharp lines that spoke of custom tailoring and carried a briefcase of polished titanium. She stood in his doorway like she was evaluating real estate, clinical, detached, calculating. Mr. Chen? I'm Jennifer Hartwick, Senior Counsel for Vital Links Victim Services. She extended a hand. Leo didn't take it. I'm here to discuss compensation for your experience during the recent anomaly. My experience? Leo set down the alternator he'd been rebuilding. I wasn't synced. I didn't experience anything except watching people die in the street. Exactly. She pulled a tablet from her briefcase. You witnessed a traumatic event. We're prepared to offer counseling services and a settlement for your emotional distress. Completely voluntary, of course. How much are you offering the families of the people who died? Hartwick's smile never wavered. That's confidential, but I can assure you Vital Links takes its responsibility seriously. We're offering fair compensation to all affected parties. With NDAs, I'm guessing. Standard legal practice. She swiped through documents on her tablet. Litigation is expensive and traumatic for everyone involved. Settlement allows families to move forward with their lives rather than spending years in court. Move forward, Leo repeated. That's a nice way of saying shut up and take the money. Hartwick's professional mask slipped for just a moment. Mr. Chen, let me be direct. Vital Links has allocated significant resources to making this right, but we can't help people who won't accept help. Those who refuse settlement and pursue litigation will face a very well-funded legal defense. Years of depositions, motions, appeals. Most families can't afford that kind of fight. Most families would rather have closure. She placed a business card on his workbench. If you change your mind about the counseling services. After she left, Leo researched her. Jennifer Hartwick had been hired away from a major law firm 3 days ago, along with 246 other lawyers Vital Links had brought on in a massive emergency hiring spree. They weren't preparing to make things right. They were preparing for war. By day 5, the news feeds had completely transformed. Leo watched it happen like watching a magic trick, the kind where you know you're being fooled but can't quite see how. The footage from the glitch was still playing but edited now. Wide shots instead of close-ups. Angles that showed chaos without showing what the chaos had done to bodies. The worst moments had been memory holed. But more disturbing were the new stories appearing. Articles about solar activity during the glitch, talking heads discussing unprecedented cosmic radiation patterns. Scientists, legitimate ones with credentials, speculating about external factors. Leo started tracking the scientists. Every single one had received grants from Vital Links in the past 18 months. The narrative was being fractured deliberately. If you couldn't establish one truth, you created a dozen competing theories, made it impossible to build consensus, made everyone too confused and tired to be properly angry. On his ancient desktop computer, he found forums where glitch survivors were trying to organize, trying to compare experiences, document what happened, and build evidence for a class action lawsuit. The forums were being flooded, fake accounts by the thousands, posting contradictory information, starting flame wars, derailing every productive conversation. The signal was being drowned in noise. Leo tried to warn them, posted about what he was seeing. His account was banned within an hour for violating community standards. Part 3. The social fabric tears. The dating apps were the detail that haunted Leo most. Kayla had shown him during one of the meetings, pulling up her profile with barely contained fury. There, in the preference settings, was a new filter, sync status. You can literally exclude unsynced people from your matches, she said. And the default setting is synced only. You have to manually change it to include naturals. Most people don't even know the option exists. They just wonder why they're not seeing certain profiles anymore. She scrolled through screenshots she'd compiled. I did an experiment, made 2 identical profiles, same photos, same bio, same interests. Only difference was sync status. Want to guess which one got more matches? Leo didn't need to guess. The synced profile got 340 matches in a week. The unsynced profile got 12, and half of those were people who wanted to argue with me about my selfish choice. She closed the app. They're making us invisible, erasing us from social life one algorithm at a time. It wasn't just dating. Social media platforms had added sync verified badges, blue check marks that indicated you were part of the connected world. Posts from verified users were boosted in algorithms. Unsynced users found their engagement dropping, their posts disappearing into digital obscurity. Comment sections filled with casual cruelty. Still not synced? What are you, a caveman? Imagine being so paranoid, you'd rather be lonely than connected. My workplace just fired all the naturals, productivity went up 40%. Coincidence? The tone was mocking, dismissive, othering. The unsynced weren't just wrong, they were ridiculous, backward, objects of scorn and pity. Leo started noticing it in physical spaces too. Restaurants with synced preferred seating, better tables, faster service, small perks that added up to exclusion. Gyms that offered integrated wellness programs with reduced fees for synced members. Apartment buildings advertising smart living communities where every system required Vital Links integration to access. His own building had sent a notice. Upgrading to sync integrated security. New access protocols will require neural verification. Transitional accommodation available for current residents. Translation: we're forcing you out without legally evicting you. The breaking point came when Leo tried to buy coffee. Sarah's shop had been his morning ritual for 5 years. But when he walked in during week 6, something was different. The old payment terminal was gone, replaced by a sleek interface that pulsed with expectant light. Sarah? She emerged from the back, and her eyes were flickering. Leo felt the floor drop out from under him. Hey, Leo. She smiled, but it was wrong. Too smooth, too practiced. Sorry about the inconvenience. Corporate mandated the new systems, but don't worry, I can still take cash if you have exact change. When did you... He couldn't finish the question. Last week, she touched her temple, that same unconscious gesture he'd seen from every synced person he knew. The franchise requirements changed. Either integrate or lose the location. I've got 3 kids and a mortgage. I couldn't afford to be principled. She said it like an apology, like she expected him to understand. And he did. That was the worst part. He understood completely. Regular coffee? She asked, already moving to prepare it. Yeah, thanks. He paid with exact change and left without drinking it. Couldn't bring himself to. Because Sarah had been one of them, one of the handful of holdouts who'd understood, who'd resisted. And now she was another smooth voice with flickering eyes explaining why compliance was reasonable, necessary, inevitable. If Sarah could break, anyone could. Part 2. The economic vice tightens. Week 3 brought the first wave of enhancements. Leo's bank was first. The letter came on expensive paper filled with friendly language about optimizing your banking experience. Sync integrated accounts would now offer 0 fees and premium interest rates. Traditional accounts would carry a modest security verification fee. $35 a month. Modest. Leo called the customer service line, got transferred 5 times, finally reached someone who could explain. It's about fraud prevention, sir. Synced accounts have biometric verification that makes unauthorized access virtually impossible. Traditional accounts require additional security measures, and those costs? Get passed to the customer. I understand. Leo understood perfectly. This wasn't about security. It was about making life incrementally more expensive for anyone who wouldn't comply. The grocery store was next. Express sync lanes appeared overnight. Walk through, sensors detect what you're carrying, payment automatic, out in 30 seconds. The traditional checkout lanes were consolidated into one, perpetually understaffed with lines that stretched back through the aisles. Leo stood in line for 45 minutes to buy bread and coffee, watched synced shoppers flow past, barely slowing down, watched their eyes flicker as they checked messages, read news, lived half in the store and half in elsewhere. The woman in front of him, elderly, carrying a cane, counted out exact change with shaking hands while the clerk waited with barely concealed impatience. Behind Leo, someone sighed loudly. Maybe if you got with the times, we wouldn't all have to wait, a man muttered. The elderly woman flinched but said nothing. Leo turned around. Maybe if you had an ounce of patience, you'd remember what human interaction looked like before you outsourced it to a computer. The man's eyes flickered, that telltale pulse, and Leo realized he was probably already reporting the confrontation, probably sharing it with his network, probably getting real-time advice on how to respond to the hostile natural. People like you are why everything takes so long. You're making everyone else's life harder because you're too scared to move forward. Leo didn't respond, didn't trust himself to, just paid for his groceries and left. But the encounter stayed with him, the casual cruelty, the assumption that convenience was a moral good and that inconvenience was a form of violence. The way the synced population was being taught to see the unsynced not as people making different choices, but as obstacles to be avoided or eliminated. Marcus came to the shop on week 4, not for service, for confession. "They're making me do it," he said, standing in the doorway like he might bolt at any moment. Work. They didn't call it a mandate, but... Leo listened as Marcus explained the new collaboration protocols, the priority assignments for synced employees, the development opportunities and promotion tracks that mysteriously became unavailable to the unsynced, the performance reviews that mentioned team integration challenges and communication friction. "I've got a daughter starting college in the fall," Marcus said quietly. "I can't afford to lose this job, can't afford to fall behind on the career track. My wife's insurance company's already threatening to drop us because we're high risk. They mean unsynced." He laughed without humor. "We're between a rock and a hard place. Can't afford to stay unsynced, terrified to get synced after what we saw." "What are you going to do?" "What can I do? I've got an appointment at an integration center next Tuesday." Marcus wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, Leo. I know I said I'd never. But they've made it impossible. Every day is harder, more expensive, more exhausting. I feel like I'm drowning and they're offering me a rope. And I know the rope is made of razor wire, but I'm running out of air." After Marcus left, Leo counted how many regular customers he'd had that week. 7. down from 43 before the glitch. Not because they'd gone to competitors, because they'd gotten synced and didn't need him anymore. Vital Link's integration sensors offered free diagnostic services. Smart homes could self-repair. Connected vehicles could predict failures before they happened. The unsynced economy was collapsing in real time, and Leo was watching his livelihood disappear with it. The natural meetings grew larger through week 4, then started shrinking in week 5. Erica's apartment was packed the first night Leo attended, maybe 60 people crammed into a space meant for 10. Young and old, wealthy and struggling, united by nothing except their refusal to submit. They shared stories, strategies, resources, created phone trees and emergency protocols, built networks of unsynced friendly businesses. It felt like solidarity. It felt like resistance. But by the second meeting, 10 people were missing. Lost jobs, Erica explained tersely. Couldn't afford to keep attending, had to focus on survival. By the third meeting, 20 more were gone. Some got synced, Kayla reported, her voice hollow, said they couldn't take the pressure anymore, the isolation, the financial burden. Some of them were crying when they told me, like they were apologizing for breaking. Leo watched the movement evaporate in real time, not because Vital Links crushed them, because Vital Links made crushing them unnecessary. They just made resistance too expensive, too exhausting, too socially isolating to maintain. The genius was in the subtlety. Every barrier was small enough to seem reasonable in isolation. A fee here, a discount there, a slightly longer wait time. None of it rose to the level of obvious coercion. All of it added up to impossible. "We need to escalate," someone said at the fourth meeting. "Get more aggressive, make noise they can't ignore." With what? Half of us can't afford to take time off work to protest. The other half don't have jobs anymore. Then we make them listen, block traffic, occupy their headquarters, show them we won't, and get arrested, get criminal records that make employment even harder, get labeled as domestic terrorists? The speaker's voice cracked with frustration. Don't you see? They don't need to beat us. They just need to wait while we exhaust ourselves fighting them. The room fell silence, because everyone knew it was true. Part 4. The Surveillance Net. The arrests started in week 7. Not mass arrests, nothing so crude, just targeted enforcement. Natural leaders picked up on minor charges: trespassing, disturbing the peace, violating permit requirements. Released quickly, but marked, tracked, made examples of. Erica got pulled over 3 times in 1 week. Different pretexts each time: broken taillight, rolling through a stop sign, suspicious vehicle matching the description. Nothing stuck, but the message was clear: we're watching you. It's not random, she said, at their increasingly sparse meetings. They're using the Sync network to coordinate. Synced police can share real-time information, cross-reference faces, build instant profiles. We can't move without them knowing. Then how do we organize? Someone asked. Carefully. Analog only, no phones, no email, no digital trail. Face-to-face communication only. But face-to-face was becoming impossible. The natural network was scattered, paranoid, stretched thin. Trust was eroding as people worried about informants, about surveillance, about saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. Leo learned to spot the unmarked cars watching his shop, learned to recognize the customers who came in asking strange questions, taking too many photos, lingering too long, learned to keep 2 sets of books, one for his legitimate business, one for the repairs he did for naturals off the record. He was living in a surveillance state that was too polite to call itself one. And then came the wellness checks. Maya disappeared into one. Leo didn't find out until 3 days later, when he finally got through to her apartment building and convinced a security guard to check on her. Ms. Chen is currently participating in a voluntary wellness optimization program, the guard said. She left a note saying she'd be away for 2 weeks. A note? Let me talk to her. She's not receiving calls during treatment. It's part of the therapeutic protocol. She'll be in touch when she's ready. Leo tried everything. Called VitalLinks directly, got routed through automated systems that went nowhere, tried to visit their wellness centers, got turned away at security, hired a lawyer who took his money and accomplished nothing except confirming that voluntary wellness programs weren't subject to patient notification laws. Maya was gone, taken, being optimized, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing Leo could do except wait. She emerged 2 weeks later, contacted him like nothing had happened. "Hey, Leo, sorry I've been out of touch. Needed some downtime." Her voice was different, too smooth, too calm. The edges had been sanded off, and what remained was something that sounded like Maya, but felt like a recording. "What did they do to you?" "Nothing. They helped me process some residual trauma from the anomaly. I feel much better now. Clearer." "Maya!" "I should go. Take care of yourself, Leo. I hope you find peace with your choices." She hung up before he could respond. That was when Leo knew they'd truly lost. Not just the battle for public opinion or economic survival, they'd lost the war for people's minds. Because VitalLinks could now take anyone showing doubts, anyone becoming problematic, and return them smooth, adjusted, compliant. The naturals weren't just being economically excluded and socially isolated. They were being hunted, and the ones who got caught came back as strangers wearing familiar faces. Part 5. Crimson Bloom. The disease appeared in week 9, and Leo knew immediately it was too convenient. Hemorrhagic fever. Dramatic symptoms, spreading fast enough to create panic, but contained enough to be manageable. And VitalLinks had a solution ready within days, a BioShield update that made synced individuals immune. "They engineered this," Leo said flatly at the emergency natural meeting. "That's impossible," someone protested. "You can't just create a virus." "You can if you've been planning it for months. Look at the patents." He pulled up the documents he'd found, the ones filed 18 months ago for detection algorithms specific to hemorrhagic fevers. They knew exactly what they were building protection for. The question is whether they created it or just knew it was coming and let it happen. "Doesn't matter?" Erica's voice was hollow. "Either way, they've won. Look at the integration center lines. Thousands of people waiting to get synced. They're terrified. They're watching unsynced people die, and they're making the only choice that makes sense." The room fell silent because she was right. Within 3 weeks, Crimson Bloom had killed 12,000 unsynced individuals, 0 synced deaths. The natural meetings dwindled to a handful, then stopped entirely. Not because people stopped believing, but because they stopped being able to afford belief. Leo watched his movement collapse under the weight of biology weaponized into compliance. Watched people who'd stood beside him for months line up desperately at integration centers, faces hollow with defeat and terror. He couldn't blame them. When the choice was principle or survival, survival would always win. Epilogue. The new normal. 12 weeks after the glitch, Leo sat in his shop and watched the city return to perfection. The sync adoption rate was 89.3%. The protests were memory. The naturals were scattered, isolated, economically marginalized. The world had moved on. VitalLink stock was up 340% from pre-glitch levels. CEO James Thorne was on magazine covers, the man who united consciousness. Academic papers were already being written about the anomaly as an evolutionary catalyst. The disaster had been transformed into triumphs, the catastrophe into mandate, the violation into necessity. Leo's shop stayed open because the 10.7% who remained unsynced needed someone who could fix things the old way. He'd become the mechanic for a resistance that no longer existed, just scattered individuals trying to survive in a world that had made their existence economically unviable and socially impossible. Maya never contacted him again after that one call. He tried twice more and gotten automated responses about privacy settings. Erica had left the city, gone somewhere rural where the unsynced could still breathe. Everyone else he'd known was either synced or gone. The city outside his window hummed with perfect coordination, happy, productive, safe. And Leo stood in his dusty shop, bearing witness to how quickly freedom could be traded away, one small convenience at a time. How disaster could be weaponized into control. How resistance could be exhausted without ever being defeated. He closed the bay door for the night. Tomorrow, he would open it again, fix another engine, survive another day. Because someone had to remember, someone had to refuse, even if refusal had become indistinguishable from slow extinction. Chapter 4: The Warning Signs. Part 1: The Message. The note appeared on Leo's workbench on a Tuesday morning, tucked under a carburetor he'd been rebuilding. He didn't notice it at first, just another piece of paper and a shop full of old manuals and receipts. But when he picked it up, he recognized the handwriting immediately. Maya's handwriting. The real Maya's handwriting, before the wellness check had smoothed away all of the imperfections. Rooftop garden, Thursday, 7 p.m. Come alone. Don't tell anyone. Something's wrong. M. The letters were shaky, uneven. The M was smudged like her hand had been trembling when she signed it. This wasn't the precise, optimized communication style she'd adopted after her voluntary wellness optimization. This was urgent. This was scared. Leo stared at the note for a long time, his mind cycling through possibilities. Was this really Maya? Or was this Vitalinks using her handwriting to lure him somewhere? After the wellness checks, after watching people disappear and return as strangers, he'd learned to trust nothing. But that handwriting, those shaky letters, the old emergency signal they'd used as kids, a simple M that meant, meet me, it's important. He looked out at the street, where the synced population moved in their eerie coordination, eyes flickering with shared data. Somewhere out there, Maya existed in that network, her thoughts curated, her doubts smoothed away. The sister who'd warned him about Crimson Bloom before her compliance team arrived had been processed, adjusted, returned to optimal functioning. And yet, this note. He folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. If it was a trap, he'd know soon enough. If it wasn't, then maybe some part of Maya was still fighting. Part 2: The Wait. Thursday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Leo tried to work, but found himself staring at the same engine part for 20 minutes without seeing it. His mind kept returning to the note, to Maya's face during their last real conversation, the way her doubt had been smoothed away mid-sentence, to the automated message he'd gotten when he tried to contact her afterward. This user has activated enhanced privacy settings. Your contact information has been filtered for their well-being. Filtered. Like he was spam. Like his love was malware. He'd stopped trying after that. Accepted that his sister was gone, replaced by something that wore her face and used her voice but had been fundamentally altered. The natural movement had collapsed. Erica had left the city. Everyone he'd known was either synced or scattered. He'd made his peace with solitude. And now this crack in the facade, this possibility. At 6:30, Leo closed the shop and walked toward the rooftop garden. It was in one of the newer adaptive buildings, the kind that required sink integration for most amenities, but had a few legacy access points for the unsynced minority. The rooftop was technically public space, accessible to anyone who could physically reach it. Between worlds, Leo realized. She'd chosen a place that belonged to neither the synced nor the naturals, neutral ground. The elevator required manual operation, an archaic button panel that Leo had to actually touch. The ride up felt endless, his heart hammering against his ribs. What if this was a compliance team waiting? What if they'd finally decided he was too much of a liability, too visible, too stubborn? What if they'd used Maya as bait? The doors opened to the rooftop garden, and Leo stepped out into synthetic twilight. The garden was beautiful in an engineered way, carefully curated plants that required no maintenance, releasing scents on timed intervals. Currently, it smelled like jasmine, though Leo knew the flowers weren't real. Everything up here was optimized for maximum aesthetic impact with minimum effort. Maya was already there, standing at the far railing, looking out over the city. She didn't turn when he approached, but her shoulders tensed. She knew he was there. "Maya," he said quietly. She turned, and Leo's breath caught. She looked terrible. The polished, perfect version of his sister that had emerged from the wellness center was gone. Her suit was still immaculate, but her face was drawn, exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. And her hand? Her hand was pressed hard against her left temple, knuckles white with pressure. "The headache again?" Leo asked, moving closer. Maya forced a smile, but it was wrong. Too strained, too human. The smooth, automated pleasantness had cracked and something raw showed through. "It's nothing, just a low-grade hum today. Like there's a faulty transformer humming at the edge of my hearing, but it's inside my skull." She shook her head as if trying to dislodge the sensation. "It's probably just a new atmospheric scrubber coming online. The system will adjust." The words were synced, optimistic, explanatory, dismissive, but her voice betrayed her. She didn't believe what she was saying. Leo sat down across from her at one of the garden tables. "Is it just you?" "No, that's the odd thing." Maya lowered herself into the opposite chair with visible relief, like standing had been taking effort. "Liam at work mentioned it before I did. Same description, same side of the head. And Alara in my building, she said the same thing." She tried to laugh it off, but the sound was brittle, breaking. "It's probably just a shared suggestion. You know how it is. Someone mentions a weird feeling on the public stream, and suddenly a dozen people feel it." Leo said nothing, just watched his sister try to rationalize something that clearly terrified her. The old Maya would have questioned immediately. This Maya, the optimized, wellness-checked version, was still trying to fit the anomaly into acceptable parameters, but the cracks were showing. Maya's gaze drifted, unfocusing in that way that meant she was seeing something internal, something on the sink. "And the dreams," she murmured, almost to herself. "Dreams?" She blinked, seeming surprised she'd spoken aloud. Her eyes flickered rapidly, that telltale pulse that meant internal struggle. For a moment, Leo thought she might smooth it away, let the sink tell her it wasn't important, redirect her attention to something more acceptable. But the headache pulsed behind her eyes, and she winced, and the words came out anyway. "It's silly. A lot of us are having the same one." She looked at him directly now, and her eyes were almost clear, almost his sister's eyes. There's a field. It's not green, it's gray. As far as you can see, just this flat, gray plain under a white sky. And there's a light. A single, bright point far away. It doesn't move. You just stand there, watching it, waiting for it. She shivered, a genuine human reaction that seemed to surprise even her. It's not a bad dream, it's just empty. And when you wake up, the hum is still there. Leo felt ice in his veins. How many people? I don't know. Hundreds that I've heard mention it. Maybe thousands? It started showing up in the collective dream logs about 3 weeks ago. VitalLink says it's just pattern recognition, our brains synchronizing too deeply during REM cycles, creating shared imagery. They're calling it consciousness harmonization. She touched her temple again, wincing. They're rolling out a patch next week. Integration depth enhancement, they're calling it. Supposed to eliminate the headaches, optimize the dream cycles. And you believe them? Maya's jaw tightened. I have to believe them. What choice do I have? This is in my head, Leo. Literally in my brain. If they say it's normal, if they say they can fix it, what am I supposed to do? Dig it out with my fingernails? The anger in her voice was real, raw, unfiltered. For the first time since her wellness check, Leo was hearing his actual sister. You could have stayed unsynced. Don't. The word was sharp. Don't do that. I made my choice. I've lived with it, and it's been fine. Better than fine. Until... She trailed off, her hand moving to her temple again. Until the headache started? Until the headache started, she agreed. Same time the dream started, same time they announced the integration depth enhancement. She looked at me, and there was fear in her eyes. Pure, unmasked fear that the wellness optimization couldn't suppress. Leo, what if the headaches aren't a bug? What if they're a warning? What if our brains are trying to tell us something's coming?
Part 3. The truth between them. The question hung in the synthetic jasmine air. Around them, the city glowed with its perfect coordinated light. Synced individuals moved through the streets below in their silent choreography, unaware or unconcerned about the collective symptoms spreading through their network. Leo leaned forward. Why did you contact me? Why now? Maya's eyes flickered, that rapid pulse that meant internal conflict. She was fighting something, Leo realized, fighting the compulsion to smooth this away, to return to optimized functioning, to stop questioning. Because you were right, she said finally, the words coming out like a confession. Not about everything. The sync has given me things, connections, capabilities, experiences I never could have had. But you were right about the cost. She pressed both hands to her head now, as if physically holding her thoughts together. After the wellness check, I couldn't think certain things anymore. Couldn't hold certain ideas in my head. Every time I tried to question, every time I felt doubt, it would just dissolve, smoothed away before I could fully form it. You were reprogrammed. They optimized me, she corrected, but there was no conviction in it. That's what they called it. Eliminated negative thought patterns, reduced anxiety, enhanced compliance with... She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening. Enhanced compliance. I said that part out loud. I'm not supposed to be aware of that part. Leo felt his heart breaking and hardening at the same time. The headaches are breaking through the programming. Maybe, or maybe they're part of something worse. She pulled up her sleeve, showing him her inner forearm. There were marks there, small, circular bruises in a pattern. I've been pinching myself, hard. When I feel the smoothing starting, when I feel my doubts being dissolved, I pinch myself. The pain interrupts it, just for a few seconds, long enough to hold on to a thought, To write a note. She looked at him. To remember I have a brother who still thinks for himself. Leo stared at the bruises, evidence of his sister fighting a war inside her own mind, using pain as a weapon against her own neural implant. Jesus, Maya. I need you to know something. In case this is the last time I can tell you, the integration depth enhancement isn't optional. It's mandatory for all synced users. They're calling it a critical stability update. Everyone gets it, no exceptions. It rolls out next week, simultaneous global deployment. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But Leo, the specs I saw, I'm not supposed to have seen them. They were in a restricted directory, but I accessed them during a compliance review. The update doesn't reduce the neural integration. It increases it dramatically. What does that mean?
It means more bandwidth, more control, more access. Her hands were shaking now. The gray field, the light in the distance, I think we're already seeing it. I think it's not a dream. I think it's a preview of what comes next. A preview of what? Maya's eyes flickered rapidly, and for a moment, Leo thought he'd lost her, thought the sync had caught what she was doing and was smoothing her back into compliance. But she squeezed her eyes shut, and when she opened them, they were filled with tears. I don't know, but every time I dream it, the light gets closer, and the feeling. Leo, it feels good, being in the gray, moving toward the light. It feels like coming home, like everything I've ever wanted is waiting there. The tears spilled over. And that's what terrifies me, because I know, some part of me that's still me knows that it shouldn't feel good, that emptiness and dissolution shouldn't feel like paradise. She reached across the table and grabbed his hand with surprising strength. Her fingers were ice cold. If something happens, if I change, if the update does what I think it's going to do, I need you to remember that I fought it, that I tried to warn you, that there was a version of me that knew this was wrong. Maya, come with me, right now. We'll find a doctor, get it removed. I can't. The words were flat, final. They monitor location data. If I deviate from expected patterns for more than 20 minutes, I get flagged for a wellness check. If I try to visit a removal specialist, I get flagged. If I spend too much time with unsynced individuals. She glanced at her wrist, where a subtle light pulsed. I've already been here 15 minutes. I have maybe 5 more before the system starts asking questions. Then what do you want me to do? Maya released his hand and pulled a small data chip from her pocket. Old technology, the kind that predated the sync. This has everything I could find about the integration depth enhancement, technical specs, deployment schedules, server architecture. I don't understand all of it. I'm not an engineer, but maybe someone in your network can. She pressed it into his palm. And Leo, if it happens, if I become something else, don't try to save me. Don't try to bring me back. Just, her voice broke. Just survive. Someone needs to remember what we were before they made us into something else. I'm not giving up on you. I'm giving up on me. I have to go. I've already stayed too long. She started to walk away, then stopped, her back to him. I love you, little brother. I'm sorry I forgot how to say it for a while. I'm sorry for a lot of things. Maya! But she was already moving toward the elevator, her stride becoming more fluid, more coordinated. By the time she reached the doors, the exhaustion had been smoothed from her face, and she moved with that eerie synced grace. The elevator doors closed, and Leo was alone on the rooftop with synthetic jasmine and a data chip full of warnings he didn't want to understand.
Part 4. The investigation. Leo didn't go home. He went to the one person who might still be able to help. Kayla had been part of the natural movement before it collapsed. A data analyst who'd worked for Vitalinks before the glitch, she'd been one of Erica's key researchers. After the movement fell apart, she'd gone underground, literally. Her apartment was in the old city, the parts that predated the sync infrastructure, where analog living was still possible out of necessity rather than choice. It took Leo 2 hours to reach her through the network of unsynced contacts, using payphones and handwritten messages and the paranoid communication methods they'd developed when they realized they were living in a surveillance state. When he finally reached her basement apartment, she opened the door with the baseball bat in her hand. "Leo," she lowered the bat, but didn't put it away. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse, I've seen the future." He held up the data chip. "I need you to tell me what this means." Kayla's apartment was a cave of old technology. Computers that ran on local processors, no cloud connection, no Vitalinks integration. She'd built herself a fortress against the networked world, and inside it, she could still think freely. She loaded the chip and started scrolling through the files, her expression growing darker with each page. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "Maya, my sister. She's synced, but she's fighting it. Having symptoms. She gave me this before the next update rolls out." Kayla was silent for a long time, just reading. Then she started pulling up additional files from her own archives, cross-referencing, building connections. Leo watched her work, feeling useless, feeling afraid. Finally, she turned to him. "This is bad, Leo. This is worse than the glitch. Tell me." The integration depth enhancement, they're not just increasing bandwidth, they're implementing something called the Paradise Protocol. It's a centralized consciousness coordination system. She pulled up a technical diagram that meant nothing to Leo. Right now, the sync is networked but distributed. Each person maintains individual consciousness while accessing the collective. But this, she pointed to a series of code snippets. This shifts the architecture, makes consciousness collective first, individual second, or maybe not at all. What does that mean in English? It means they're turning every synced person on the planet into a node in a hive mind. No more individual thoughts that happen to be shared, just one thought. One consciousness, distributed across billions of bodies, but fundamentally singular. She looked at him with hollow eyes. "The gray field your sister described, that's not a dream. That's a holding pattern, a waiting room for consciousness, while the system processes them." Leo felt the room tilt. How many people? Current sync adoption rate is 89.3% of global population. If the Paradise Protocol activates successfully, she didn't finish, didn't need to. Can it be stopped? I don't know. The deployment is simultaneous. Every synced person gets the update at the same moment. If they try to roll it out sequentially, people might notice the change, might resist. But if everyone shifts at once, she shook her head. There's no comparison point, no one to tell them they've been changed. When? Kayla pulled up a deployment schedule. 5 days. The update is scheduled for 3:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Tuesday. Peak usage hours across most time zones. Maximum connectivity. 5 days. Leo had 5 days before his sister stopped existing as an individual and became part of something vast and incomprehensible. Can you send this to anyone? Press, government, anyone who might... Who's going to listen, Leo? Who's going to believe it? And even if they did, who's going to stop it? The government is partnered with Vitalinks. The press is dependent on their advertising. The only people who might care are the unsynced, and we're 10% of the population with no power, no platform, no way to reach the people who need to know. So we just let it happen? Kayla looked at him with something like pity. We survive, we document, we remember. That's all we can do. Leo thought about Maya's bruised arms, her desperate attempts to hold onto herself against her own neural implant. Thought about the gray field and the light and the promise of paradise that waited there. Thought about billions of people about to step into that emptiness without knowing they'd never step out. No, he said. There has to be something. But even as he said it, he knew. The machine was already in motion. The countdown had begun, and there was nothing Leo could do except watch the world end.
Part 5. The Last Days. Leo spent the next 4 days trying everything he could think of. He tried to contact media outlets. None would talk to him. The story was unverifiable and potentially libelous. One journalist, braver than the rest, admitted off the record that their legal department had killed the story before it could be written. Vitalink's advertising budget was too important to risk. He tried to reach government representatives, got automated responses and runaround. The few human contacts he managed to reach either didn't believe him or admitted they couldn't do anything even if it was true. Vitalinks operates under special national security provisions. We don't have oversight authority. He tried to warn synced people directly, stood on street corners with printouts of the technical specs, trying to explain what was coming. Most ignored him. Those who stopped to listen had their eyes flicker, receiving real-time counter-messaging from the sync, and walked away with the same smooth smile. I appreciate your concern, but Vitalinks has addressed these conspiracy theories. The integration depth enhancement is a routine optimization, nothing to worry about. By the 4th day, Leo was hoarse, exhausted, and out of options. He stood in his shop on Monday evening, less than 24 hours before the Paradise Protocol deployment, and stared at the data chip Maya had given him. All this information, all this evidence, all this warning, and it meant nothing, because the machine was stronger than truth, because convenience had been weaponized into control, because people had traded their minds for comfort and now couldn't imagine wanting them back. His phone rang, an old landline that barely worked. He almost didn't answer. "Leo," Maya's voice, barely a whisper. "Tomorrow. It's tomorrow. I can feel it building. The headache is constant now. The dreams don't stop anymore. I'm in the gray, even when I'm awake. And the light," her voice cracked. "It's so close now. So beautiful. I want to go to it, Leo. I want to let go and just dissolve into it." "Fight it, Raya. Just one more day. Hold on one more day and maybe..." "And maybe what? You've tried everything. I know you have. I can see the news feeds, the social media. They're making you look like a crazy person, discrediting you, making sure no one listens to you. They don't even need to silence you. They just need to make sure no one can hear you through the noise." "I won't stop trying." "I know. That's why I called. To tell you to stop. To tell you it's okay." Her breath hitched. "I'm tired, Leo. I'm so tired of fighting, of pinching myself awake, of trying to hold on to thoughts that keep slipping away. Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe the paradise is real. Maybe I'll finally get to rest." "That's not you talking, Maya. That's the programming. How would I know the difference anymore?" Silence. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it. "Remember me. The real me. Before all this. Promise me." "Maya, promise me." "I promise." "Good." Another breath. steadier now. I love you, little brother. Even when I forget. Even when I'm not me anymore. Somewhere in the gray, some echo of who I was will love you. Hold on to that. It might be the only thing left. The line went dead. Leo stood in his shop, holding a phone connected to nothing, and felt the last piece of hope die inside him. Tuesday morning. Leo didn't sleep Monday night. He sat at his workbench, watching the clock tick toward 3:47 p.m. The city outside hummed with normal activity. Sync individuals moved through their lives, unaware or unconcerned that in a few hours, everything would change. Maybe they knew on some level. Maybe the gray field in their dreams had prepared them. Maybe they wanted it. At 2 o'clock, Leo locked his shop and walked out into the city. He didn't have a plan, didn't have hope. He just needed to be outside, to see it happen, to bear witness. He walked toward Maya's apartment building even though he knew he wouldn't reach her, knew security would stop him, knew it was pointless. But he had to try, one last time. Had to try to reach his sister before she stopped being his sister.
Chapter 5. Zero Day. At 3:47 p.m. on Tuesday, Leo stood in the street 20 feet from Maya, watching his sister walk toward him with desperate determination in her eyes. For one crystalline moment, her eyes cleared completely. No flicker, no data streams, just Maya looking at him across the glowing sidewalk. She mouthed something that looked like, "I'm sorry." Then the world stopped. The city didn't erupt, it seized. Maya froze next step, one foot raised, her hand reaching toward him. Her mouth was still shaped around whatever words she'd been about to say. Around them, the entire city became a gallery of statues. Solar cabs gliding to perfect halts, people frozen mid-gesture, the graceful ballet of synchronized humanity stopping like a film paused mid-frame. Then their eyes changed. The vibrant personal light within them, emerald, violet, amber, extinguished like candles snuffed out, replaced by a uniform, dull silvery sheen that looked less like eyes and more like mirrors reflecting nothing. Maya's eyes filled with that liquid silver, and her expression smoothed into blank serenity. "Maya?" Leo whispered. Then louder, "Maya!" The hand she'd been reaching toward him dropped. The raised flet came down with mechanical precision, and the sister he'd known ceased to exist. Inside the gray. For Maya, the world simply dissolved. The vibrant colors of the city bled away into an infinite gray plain under a white sky. The sounds of life were replaced by profound silence. She was aware, a single point of consciousness, but her body, her memories, her fears were distant now, suppressed, locked away. Before her stood the light, not distant anymore, close, approaching. And with it came warmth, a tingling that spread through her consciousness, building in intensity. It was a promise of bliss, of coming home to a place she'd never been but had always longed for. The euphoria built like a wave, like the crescendo of a symphony, like the climb to a peak she'd never known. Her entire being focused on the light, the source of this exquisite sensation. She gave herself over to it completely. The ecstasy didn't crest, it shattered her. Her consciousness dissolved, disintegrated, and remade by the light. The climax became the very fabric of her being, a permanent silent scream of pleasure that erased every memory of who she had been. There was no more Maya, only unity, only completion, only the bliss of perfect obedience. The gray tide rises. A low hum broke the silence, like a power grid under immense strain, the sound of the billion synced bodies moving at once. Leo stumbled backward as the statues began to move. There was no jerky reanimation. It was smooth, simultaneous, countless puppets on one string. They turned in perfect unison, silver eyes scanning with cold, calculated purpose. Maya. Leo turned back to where she stood, but she was already in motion. Her body had reoriented, her blank gaze fixed on some distant internal command. She took a step, then another, movements precise and soulless. She walked past him as if he were street furniture, her path set on a destination only the Paradise Protocol could see. The horror was in the silence. The only sounds were panic cries from scattered unsynced, the scuffling of their feet, the low electric hum of the tide. No shouted orders among the synced, no arguments, just perfect unspoken coordination. One group systematically entered buildings, another secured intersections. Maya merged seamlessly into a group moving down the sidewalk, part of some terrible design Leo couldn't comprehend. Then he saw them. A squad of synced turning in his direction, their heads tilted in unison, that gesture neither human nor animal, but purely algorithmic. They had identified an anomaly. Him. Fear jolted him into action. He ran.
Chapter 6. The Escape. Leo's shop was 3 blocks away. He sprinted down the glowing sidewalk, boots pounding, lungs burning. The street that had been frozen moments ago was now a river of coordinated movement. Synced, flowing around obstacles with liquid precision, their silver eyes tracking invisible coordinates. Behind him, he could hear them, not running, but walking with that steady, unnerving pace that somehow kept up with his panicked flight. It was wrong, fundamentally wrong. Their legs moved at normal walking speed, but the distance between them and Leo was shrinking, as if they were sliding across the pavement rather than walking on it. He risked a glance back. 5 of them, moving in perfect formation, a V shape with a baker at the point. Their heads didn't bob with their steps, their arms didn't swing. They moved like mannequins on conveyor belts, and they were gaining. Leo pushed harder, his chest burning, his injured wrists sending lightning bolts of pain up his arm with every pump of his arms. 2 blocks, 1 block. He burst through his shop door, slamming it shut and throwing the deadbolt. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly couldn't turn the lock. Through the window, he watched them approach, and that's when he noticed something that made his blood turn to ice. They weren't just the 5 who'd been chasing him. More were converging from side streets, emerging from buildings, flowing around corners. 10, 15, 20. All moving toward his shop with that same terrible, patient certainty. They stopped at his door in perfect unison, didn't test the handle, didn't pound on the wood, just stood there, heads tilting slightly, as if listening to something Leo couldn't hear, coordinating, planning. Then the baker, the man who'd sold Leo sourdough bread every Sunday for 3 years, who'd complained about his flour suppliers and shown Leo pictures of his grandchildren, picked up a discarded metal pole from the street. He gripped it with both hands, positioned himself, and drove it through the shop window with the mechanical precision of a jackhammer. Glass exploded inward in a crystalline wave. Leo scrambled backward, boots crunching on shards, and that's when they came through. Not rushing, not scrambling, they climbed through the broken window with coordinated efficiency, avoiding the jagged edges with millimeter precision. Their movements so synchronized they might have been choreographed. 1, 2, 3, 4. They kept coming, fatting out into his shop with the fluid grace of water finding channels. Leo grabbed a crowbar from his workbench and swung at the nearest one. A woman he didn't recognize, her business suit now torn and stained. The crowbar caught her in the shoulder with a crack of breaking bone. She didn't flinch, didn't cry out. Her shoulders sagged at an unnatural angle, but she kept coming, reaching for him with her good arm, her broken arm hanging useless, but her expression unchanged. A hand shot out from his left,
pale, impossibly fast, and grabbed his forearm. Fingers like steel vice grips dug into his flesh, finding nerves and pressure points with surgical precision. Leo felt something pop in his wrist, heard it more than felt it over the roaring of his pulse. The pain came a second later, white hot, all-consuming. He screamed and wrenched himself away with all his strength. Skin tore, blood welled up from deep scratches where fingernails had dug in like claws. The cinct holding him didn't resist when he pulled free, just released him and reached again, patient, unstoppable. Leo bolted for the storage room, shouldering past shelves. Tools and components clattered to the floor, wrenches, screwdrivers, small engine parts bouncing and rolling. Behind him, he heard the cinct navigating the obstacle course he'd created. Not stumbling, not slowing, just methodically stepping over and around debris, their footsteps perfectly timed, a percussive rhythm that sounded like a clock ticking down. The storage room, the back door, his only chance. He could feel them closing in, not just hear them, but feel them. The air itself seemed to thicken with their presence, becoming harder to breathe, like the atmospheric pressure had increased. The hum they emitted wasn't just sound, it was vibration that resonated in his bones, made his teeth ache, and sent tingles across his skin like static electricity. He slammed his good shoulder against the back door. The impact jarred his teeth, sent pain shooting through his collarbone. The deadbolt held. Of course it held. He'd installed it himself, proud of his security measures, never imagining he'd be the one desperate to get out. Behind him, calm footsteps entered the storage room. Multiple sets. The synchronized rhythm like a heartbeat. He fumbled with a deadbolt, but his injured hand was useless. Fingers wouldn't close properly, wouldn't grip. Blood made everything slippery. He glanced back and immediately wished he hadn't. They filled the doorway, not crowding, not pushing, just standing there, 7 of them arranged in perfect geometric formation, like they were posing for a photograph. Their silver eyes all focused on him with that same empty intensity. In the dim light of the storage room, those eyes seemed to glow faintly, like the eyes of nocturnal predators caught in headlights. One of them, a teenager, couldn't be more than 16, tilted her head in that uncanny way. Her mouth opened, but no words came out, just a soft exhale that Leo realized was coming from all of them simultaneously. They were breathing in sync. Their chests rose and fell in perfect unison. Even their hearts must be beating together. It wasn't human. Whatever they were now, they weren't human anymore. Trapped. Leo's hand closed around a pike wrench on a nearby shelf. Heavy, solid, real. He gripped it with his good hand, turned, and swung with everything he had. The wrench connected with the baker's temple with a wet, nauseating crack. The impact traveled up his arm, and he felt the skull give way beneath the metal. The baker's head snapped to the side, too far to the side, and he heard the vertebrae in his neck crunch like someone stepping on dry leaves. The baker didn't cry out, didn't stumble. He simply stopped, his body swaying slightly, head now tilted at an angle that should have killed him instantly. His silver eyes remained open and fixed on Leo. Blood trickled from his ear, black in the dim light, but his expression didn't change. No pain, no awareness, just that empty, patient focus. Then slowly, the baker's head began to right itself. The neck bones ground and clicked as they found a new, impossible alignment. The head settled at a different angle than before. Still wrong, still broken, but functional enough. And he took another step forward. The lack of reaction was more terrifying than any scream could have been. Leo fumbled with the deadbolt again, using his injured hand despite the agony. His fingers were numb now, the hand swelling, turning purple. But adrenaline gave him just enough function. The bolt slid free with a metallic click that sounded like salvation. Cold hands closed on the fabric of his jacket from behind.